So thank you, Lama, for your kind words. Indeed, my name is Jaïr. I'm from Amsterdam. I'm responsible for startups at Miro. And as you can see behind me, I'm a tennis player. I'm also a part-time tennis coach. And what you see here, for people that don't know tennis, this is the service. And every rally starts with a service. And actually, this is the only moment that you as a tennis player are in complete control what is going to happen with the ball. There's no incoming ball from the opponent. It's just you throwing up the ball, dictating what you're going to do with the service. And I would really recommend as a tennis player to optimize for this because you want to have a good service. I argue that it's similar for startup culture. You are now, as a founder, in the driver's seat to decide what type of behaviors, decisions are made in your startup. You don't know how to control the market, if your co-founder will quit, or if a war breaks out. So take time to set up that startup culture to really get a competitive advantage over your competition. So we're going to talk a bit about startup culture and how to set it up in the most beneficial way for you as a startup. Although we know maybe that this culture is quite important or that it's the only thing that we might can control in the beginning, you see that a lot of founders don't take the time because they're so busy to work on their culture early on. And that's also because there are some myths that are evolving around culture. One of them is that culture does not really matter because we cannot measure it, right? So we want to make it quantitative, but we don't know how. So at the end, I promise to give you some questions where you can do a cultural audit that will help you to understand a bit better how good is my culture, how healthy is my culture. The second myth is culture is really about pay and benefits. Sometimes I ask friends, hey, how's the culture at your job? They say, oh yeah, it's good. We got a good pay and we have a table tennis table. Really, that's how people think of culture. But it's really more about the intrinsic motivation. Why should somebody work for you, especially in this era where every great engineer can work for Google, Meta. But why should this engineer start working for your startup? Culture can really be the deciding factor here. And then the third aspect is culture takes long to build, and that's completely false because every decision that you make now as a startup founder early on is already building your culture. And I would like to also stress that it's way more difficult to change your culture after you start scaling. It's way easier to do it in the beginning. So that were some myths on why startup founders don't take the time to build culture early on. I said the word culture a lot already, I noticed that. So let's dive into the definition about what startup culture is as well, because this is some interviews that I did with some successful founders. I just asked them the question, what does startup culture mean for you? You can take a look here. It's really different. All those definitions are really different. I'll give you a little bit of time to read. But there are definitely a big variety of how people approach culture. And that makes it also difficult because we don't really know what it is. So I'm going to help you here a little bit. Let's use this definition for today. So really, culture is comprised by the beliefs and behaviors of its founders, leaders, and employees. If we use this, we can steer this a bit better. So let's use that for today. So knowing this definition, I would like to move over to your two main objectives as a successful founder. So you want to get that 10 times better product, and you want to get to the market as quickly as possible. I'm not going to say here now that culture is going to definitely solve this for you, but it's definitely going to make it easier to achieve both of them. Mainly because you will need problem-solving capabilities, quick problem-solving capabilities inside your company. You will need a team that is aligned and that can move fast. If you have a solid culture, it will become easier to achieve both of them. So it's definitely a competitive advantage if you take a step back, focus on your team, focus on the behaviors, focus on the beliefs that you have, and get to that market faster and get that 10 times better product. If two companies, for example, try to achieve the same and one has a healthy startup culture, it's definitely an advantage over the other one. And then there's an interesting thing that maybe we have learned a lot about corporate culture on business school, but we cannot copy this directly to the startup world. Why is this? Because the people here in the room, you're risk takers, you're challenging the status quo, you're people that really want to do something new. This means if you work for a corporate, you're just trying to consolidate the business and make sure that the business still exists in 100 years from now. And this means that there's different behaviors and characteristics that you need to have working in a startup. First one is the level of responsibility. There's so much more to do and so little people in your company, so you need to take more responsibility and you need to be more flexible, right? Because today you're the head of marketing, tomorrow the head of finance, and next week you'll be the head of sales. You really need to be flexible, otherwise it's really hard to be successful in a startup culture. And then another thing, which is not that great, the work-life balance isn't that balanced if you work for a startup. And it means that it's not for everybody. So don't expect that everybody wants to work in a startup as well. So that is the three maybe negative aspects, or not negative, but maybe more challenging aspects. The fourth one I see as a big advantage working for a startup is that you feel that you're part of something bigger. You're challenging the status quo. You do something what has not been done before. And that also demands a certain type of people. It needs somebody that likes to do stuff that not have been done before. So take this into consideration. Don't copy-paste what you have learned at business school and apply it to startup culture, because there are some differences for sure. Okay, moving further now to a little bit more the practicalities. How can we help to make that startup culture the most healthy for your business? There are three must-haves that you really need to do. First one is get a clear and adopted mission and values. You need to do it early on before you start scaling. You need to be able to have a first principle, your mission, which is inspiring, which makes sure that there's focus, because your team is growing, hopefully. Your team needs to do a lot of things, but they need to do the right things. And if you have your mission clearly stated, they can always think, hey, what's our first principle again? Does this make sense to do? Yes or no? And then they can focus. And the values are really the behaviors that you would like to see. And I would love for you to ask yourself the question, what type of company I don't want to be first? And then right from there, the values that are important to you. The second must-have is psychological safety. And for me, psychological safety has two sides. One is the safety to be able to come up with new ideas, be able to speak openly about innovative, stupid, crazy ideas that people might have in your team, because then you can get a 10 times better product. They maybe have the pivot in their mind that they need to have a better product. That's the first. So give them the room to come up with ideas and make it feel that it's really expected from them to come up with ideas. The other side of psychological safety is really by people in your team needs to feel safe to identify problems. If you are seeing problems, they need to be able to speak up about those problems, because if you don't identify the problems, you're not able to solve them. So your team should be able to identify problems and be rewarded for bringing problems to you. They should really see that it's something that is normal in your business. Talk about failures, make sure that they can identify problems, otherwise you cannot solve them. So psychological safety is another must-have. And then the third one, which is quite closely related to the second, is genuine relationships. If you want to move fast, you want to have trust to get the psychological safety, and you build this by having genuine relationships. And I'm not saying that you have to be best friends or family-like relations, but at least you need to know in your team what is this person driving, what is their passion, what is their things that make them tick. It's really about making sure that you understand the context what this person is coming from, and you do this by focusing also on non-transactional activities. So don't just have work-related activities, but really make time for non-transactional activities where you can meet with each other and talk about who you really are. And if you do this, you will get to that psychological safety quicker. And the interesting thing here is that it takes about 50 hours for grown-up people to become light friends. So yeah, if I'm 50 hours with somebody in the same room, I consider somebody a light friend. For a baby, it takes about 30 seconds, so we have a disadvantage here. But if we get that light friendship, I'm 100% sure that you can get that psychological safety faster, and you will be able to really connect as a team and get to that market quicker again. So these are the three must-haves. Then here are some practical takeaways that you can just use right now as a founder already to improve your startup culture. You might have already done some. Take a look, you can take a picture. I will quickly go through them. So first of all, you need to take time and effort to take a step back to write down your mission and values. We talked about this. Don't wait before you start scaling. Do it now. Make sure that you validate your values bottom up. So your values come from you as a founding team, but you put them in the team if you already have a team and ask them, like, are these our values? Do they make sense for you? Maybe you have something to add and make it a shared culture. Your mission is yours. Your mission is from you as a founder. You know how to change the world, so you don't ask the team. That's something that you come up with, but it needs to be really clear and inspiring. Then the second is more like an application of those values. Make sure that you include value-based questions. I heard the speaker before, two speakers before, about having a really bad hire. I want you to avoid those really bad hires, and therefore make sure that you include value-based questions in your hiring process. What I mean by this is that it's way easier to train technical skills than value-based skills, because value-based skills, it's just who you are. It's really hard to change this. So if my values don't align with the company that I work for, it's really hard to become a good fit in this company. So what you do, for example, if you're working for Netflix, you will probably get a question, or if you're applying for Netflix, one of their values is you need to be able to be courageous and take risks. So a question would be in this interview process, when is the last time that you do something risky, something that you didn't dare to do? And you can see if this person likes to answer this or that is hesitant. So then you have maybe an idea if this value is aligned or not. Then the third practical takeaway, it's about feedback always. So it's not in every culture it's so common to give feedback directly to each other. However, I would argue that if you work for a startup and you want to get a 10 times better product and you want to get to the market fast, you need to have a feedback culture. As a leader, how do you build this? Like every one-on-one that you have, what you can do is just save 3 minutes at the end, say, hey, do you still have feedback for me? I have some feedback for you. Make it really normal that feedback is part of your culture and that it's expected to give. Then the fourth one, how do we build those genuine relationships? So iterate on your non-transactional activities. We're still trying to figure out what is the best way, and it's tricky because not everything works for everybody. We did like online coffee meetings, we did online pub quizzes, we do online escape rooms, we do like dinner boxes sending to each other's houses, and then we have dinner in front of Zoom. We're not sure what works yet, but you need to iterate on it, just like you iterate on your product, because everybody in your team is different, and we need to give it a try and make sure that we get that genuine relationships. There's one way to hack this. If you have the time and resources, go do an offsite, meet in person, because you will get that 50 hours of friendship making the quickest. So if you have time and resources, meet in person, and I'm 100% sure that it will pay off on the long run. And then the last practical takeaway is really about do evaluate your culture. So it's not that your culture is rigid, it changes over time. Your mission probably won't change so quickly, but your values can change maybe on a half-year basis. So what you do, you put them again in your team, you ask for feedback, are they still relevant? Do we need to add something? Does this still make sense? And you make it a shared culture again. So I told you in the beginning I would get back to some questions, how you could do a cultural audit, how can you measure if your startup culture is working? I won't go into all of them, I will focus on the last three. So what I really like to ask is there direct communication? Can I speak to my boss's boss? If I can speak to my boss's boss, it saves time, right? So I can get quicker to the market. So that's the first question you can ask if it's working or not. Is the mission clear and do they feel that they're part of something bigger? If I ask somebody here on the TechChill, hey, where do you work? And this person just responds, I'm a sales rep, point, that's it. That doesn't really feel like this person feels it's part of something bigger. If I ask somebody here at TechChill, like, hey, what's your job? And they say, I work for a startup that's democratizing education, and I'm a sales rep there. It is a sign that this person feels they're part of something bigger. So it's another way to check if there is a good culture or not. And then the last one, maybe the most important, do colleagues know each other more than the work that they're just doing? Look, what drives them? What is their family situation? Where do they go on holiday? Yeah, again, you don't need to be really good friends or family-like, but you need to understand the context that they come from. So I would like to leave you with this picture. The guy in the middle, this is Rafael Nadal, best tennis player, male tennis player on this moment. He had won the most Grand Slam titles in the Open era. And as you can see, he didn't do this alone. He has a big team around him. And I would like to argue that your startup culture could be like a professional sports team where you can be brutally honest to each other. You can tell, like, come on, you're not doing your best. You can do better. This is not the level that we want to see. But also you can celebrate with each other, and you know why somebody is struggling. So try to make this genuine connections with your colleagues. Make sure that you can trust each other and be brutally honest with each other. And then I'm sure that your product can get that competitive advantage over your competitors, and you will have also way more fun working together when you have a healthy startup culture. So with this, I'd like to leave you. Here, if you want to get to the presentation, you can scan this, and thank you for listening.